Welcome back, everybody. Got some coffee, some movement, so hopefully we're ready for a day full of some exciting panels. I introduced myself earlier, but in case if you missed it, I'm Nicole Watts. I am the founder and CEO of Hope Print. And I have the pleasure today of moderating our Placemaking, Open Spaces and Public Amenities panel. And so I am wanting each of my fine panelists here that I get to spend this morning with to introduce themselves and share just a little snapshot of what they're up to in life and what their background is that makes them the experts that they are, to come and to share their insights with us. So if you can start us off.
Okay, mic check. Josh Wilcox. I'm with the Syracuse City Parks Department. I am a parks planner and a landscape designer through ESF, which was my undergrad, and the University of Buffalo for my urban planning master's. That's kind of how I got started into placemaking and into the Parks Department in general, was just the idea that we could really connect with the community on a lot of real site-centric designs and to introduce something that's new, something that's modern in the city that's kind of stuck in the 1980s. That's how I got here.
Hi, everyone. I'm Maren King, and I am actually a professor emeritus at SUNY ESF in the Department of Landscape Architecture. I spent the first 20 years of my career practicing landscape architecture. I'm a licensed professional in New York State. Worked for a number of years in Philadelphia for a large urban design and landscape architecture firm there, and also worked for a couple of firms here in Syracuse. But about 20 years ago, moved back up to Syracuse and decided that I would do a mid-career change and went back to college, get my master's degree with a focus on research and the practice of community design. And it was there that I had some really life-changing experiences and faculty mentors who really changed the way I think about how we design, what our roles are, and how we actually engage community members in design process, planning, and taking action. And that's what I'm going to talk about a little bit today. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Victoria Coit, and I'm the founder of Q's Culture, a media group. Originally started off as Q's Culture magazine. I grew up in Syracuse. I moved away for some time to DC on Capitol Hill at the height of gentrification, and moved back to Syracuse because I felt like I had work to do here. I mainly, through media, create events in Syracuse to give folks a tour of Syracuse, to create spaces where they see themselves, where they haven't seen themselves before, and then to also break down silos. Thank you for having me.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me among the distinguished speakers and the great team here. This is Munira Aziz. I've been mostly involved in democracy and working with political institutions on governance and democracy sector in developing countries, but since I have resettled in United States, I had the honor of being connected with Hope Print and contributing into the community level and women empowerment activities. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Andrew Frazier. I am here with ADAPT CNY. I also work for the SMTC, that's the Syracuse Metropolitan Transportation Council. I studied geography at Syracuse University. From Syracuse, love living here now. It's just a wonderful place. Adapt has been involved in placemaking things before. Something that we really worked on was parking day, and we built our own parklet, so that was a good kind of foray into the placemaking space. But recently we've been working on the Community Streets program, which I eventually will talk a little bit more about. But really excited to kind of share with all of you a little bit of an overview of the program and just some of the success stories and what we're looking forward to in the future.
Beautiful. So today we're going to be in this panel predominantly talking about public space. And in various ways, this all falls under the moniker in terms of how we respond, create within, and treat our public space falls under the moniker of placemaking. And I'm wondering, Maren, if you can start us off with further defining what is this placemaking thing?
Thanks, Nicole. I'm speechless now. Well, placemaking has a lot of different definitions. That's what I've learned. Is it hard to hear this microphone? You okay? But when we were having a conversation a few days ago about this panel, and Nicole said, well, what is it that you want to talk about? And I said, well, I want to talk about placemaking and my understanding of placemaking. And I realized that about 25 years ago, I read a book that changed my life and the way I practice. And that book is called Placemaking. And placemaking, the art and practice of building communities. And it was written by two faculty members at University of Buffalo, Linda Schneekloth and Robert Shibley, who also had an academic practice. And this was one of the first books that I read when I was in the graduate program in landscape architecture. And how they described placemaking, here's a quote, placemaking is the way in which all human beings transform the places they find themselves into the places where they live. And they give examples of placemaking and the fact that we're all placemakers. Everyone is a placemaker, and we think about our daily activities, the fact that we maybe clean up our kitchen and we cook a meal for our friends, or we're working out in our yard, making it look better or the way we want it to be. We want to invite people over and share that. We're working in a vacant lot. There's so many things that we do on a daily basis as just everyday part of our lives. So all of us are placemakers. And this book actually is meant for professional placemakers and telling us as professional placemakers, everybody is a placemaker. And the fact that through some of our activities and our education and our practices, our professional practice, sometimes we actually disable the people who we are working with or for in their practice of placemaking. And so this book actually really provided me with some new insights and like, wait a second, that's true. In my practice, in 20 years of professional practice, I had a lot of clients, I asked them a lot of questions, but I was always the one who was doing the design. And when we start actually engaging community members in design process, we're bringing our professional expertise and they're bringing their local expertise. And so the practice that I have been involved with over the last 20 years is to engage community members in that practice of placemaking. At the same time, teaching students in landscape architecture and planning and environmental studies, environmental science, how do we engage community members in those practices with us, where we're sharing our expert knowledge and they're sharing their local expertise and their knowledge of their communities, the things that are important to them, their values, and then the fact that they're the ones who are actually going to continue to live in that place, in those places.
Beautiful. And as we go through this panel, this is a long day if you just sit here and listen to everyone, though we can drink it all in, I'm sure. But I want to encourage you to actively participate, because if what Maren just said is true, which I believe it is, you're a placemaker. And so I want to encourage you, as we go through the rest of this panel, take out a piece of paper, take out your phone, and start thinking about what that place is for you, that you already are active in placemaking, and or maybe you want to become active in placemaking, so that as these ideas and insights are shared, you can take them home, make them personal, and they're written down somewhere, so when you go home today, you actually remember them and can put them into action. I also want to just quickly highlight that up on the screen you see onlinequestions.org. You can pull that up on your phone, no app needed, just go to your browser, onlinequestions.org, and then you'll see a place to enter a number. You enter 10719 to enter in any questions that you have as we go through this panel, and we'll circle back to those, many of those as we can at the very end. So, Josh, while placemaking can and does happen like in the living room and private spaces, today we're really looking at public space, that space that belongs to the public. And you're probably the most knowledgeable among us in terms of public land here in the city of Syracuse. Can you talk to us about this resource at our fingertips?
Okay. So I started the other day when we had a quick discussion about placemaking and what we would discuss. It reminded me of something that Alan Jacobs had said in the book Great Streets. It's a common book just assigned to planning and landscape architecture programs across the nation. And Alan Jacobs said that the largest park in the United States is actually the streets, because the streets are the one place that we can all go. It's the one place that's public, and it's the one place that we all actually have control over when it comes to how we want that street to function when we're on it, when we're using it. It's pretty easy to remember being a kid and using the hockey goals to shut down a street to cars, and then you have a block party an hour later. That's an opportunity here in Syracuse that we have all over. We have a lot of infrastructure that needs to be upgraded, but we have a lot of space, a lot of vacant space, a lot of areas that can use placemaking to benefit an entire community. We've seen examples across Syracuse through Parking Day, through the Hope Print initiative with over on the north side, and then various initiatives that the Parks Department is undertaking right now through working with the Urbanism Collective, like the Mini Meadows program. There's all these smaller, petite little projects that when you look at them together and the whole system of the Parks Department and what we have as public land, it really creates, I believe, a better sense of community in the end, because people really have a voice and they can see that their voice is actually being heard, that it's being implemented, and it comes down to the, I'll speak on for me, but it comes down to the city's willingness to actually meet the community where they're at rather than to invite them into someplace else. And that's how I think we're always going to advance placemaking, at least on the public sector.
Beautiful. Yet as we drive around the city, it doesn't take an expert to notice that there's disparities in those streets, those sidewalks, those public parks, all these public spaces that we have. They're at various levels of repair and otherwise. And Victoria, you've lived in a lot of neighborhoods across Syracuse. You've witnessed, experienced, talked to community members about some of these disparities. Can you speak to the impact of that on community flourishing?
I think that though it doesn't take much to recognize a disparity, I guess I would choose to shift it into an opportunity, right? What I didn't mention is that I am also a daughter of a single mother that's a dreamer, right? And so when she would drive around Syracuse when we were younger, she would say, "What would you do in that space? What would you do with that building?" And I thought it was a game, right? That we just would play to keep us occupied. But it activated something inside of me that was able to say, okay, this is not, for example, right outside, we have Perseverance Park, right? On the corner of Salina and Fayette. It used to be the central bus hub, right? And then it turned into a park. Recently, I started doing a festival in that space, which activated the space and gave the space a soul. And I think a lot of times, even if there is a space that that is in disrepair, it's the people, the dream, it's the action and what happens in that space that starts to shift people's understanding of what Syracuse can be and what it isn't at the time, right? So you start to get your creative juices flowing, not just for yourself, but the other people that you draw to the space and the soul that you put into the space, if that makes sense.
Absolutely does, and is a perfect lead into this next piece, which is the Community Streets program that you mentioned, Andrew. Can you speak a little bit to what that is and what those possibilities are?
There we go. Excellent. Thank you, Nicole. So just to give a little bit of an overview of the Community Streets project, in the past, there's been this desire, right along with what everybody has said so far, to kind of place make, because we are all placemakers, as you said, Maren, and there are opportunities to do that in the streets. Now, that might not have been as easy in the past, just due to the different permitting recommendations or other things that you have to do anything. So the Community Streets program wanted to try and bridge that gap and make it a little bit easier, just try to do small pop-up projects. So this was an effort between the city of Syracuse, between the SMTC, and with ADAPT CNY. Really with a goal of doing these small pop-up projects on mostly local streets. So last year was our pilot year. We were able to select 3 streets, ADAPT CNY, to fund some sort of small improvements. That was Hope Print on the north side, which had a great project, the Al Chemical Nursery on the near west side, and then we had a project from the Ed Smith PTO. Ed Smith hasn't happened yet just because National Grid is doing some work in the street, but we're really looking forward to putting that in the ground next year. So some of you might think, oh, well, this is great, you're doing a one-time thing, but today is a good opportunity to say that we're actually opening up applications today for another round of Community Streets projects. So I have a little flyer here, which you can scan a QR code on, and it'll take you to the website, which will give you a lot more information about the different types of Community Streets projects that you can apply to implement, and really just kind of give a little bit more information about the program. We're looking to do, probably 2 projects this year. And again, a lot more information is on the website, but the goal really is to do this sort of placemaking. I think, Victoria, you made a really good point of if you can, I'm sure all of us do this as well. looking outside and saying like, hey, what could we do with that, right? Like that's such a great game, but just a wonderful thing to do to help you become a dreamer and to think about public space. Josh, like you're saying, this, the street is the biggest park. So what are some things? Community streets really gives you an opportunity to be that placemaker at a small scale. I think it's key to note that it's great to go for the low-hanging fruit with that. I'm sure all of us, myself included, have wonderful dreams of what we would do if we could just, wave a wand and change anything in the streets in our community. But community streets really let you take some ideas and bring them into action. And so we're talking smaller scales. We're talking about maybe like bump outs, so make pedestrian crossings easier. Nicole and Hope Print put a wonderful mural and, was able to close off and activate a space a little bit. Ed Smith is going to do, again, some sort of pedestrian bump outs and improvements in an area near a school, which, there's a lot of pedestrian traffic. So these are all just kind of great opportunities to not only, make some improvements for people using the streets that aren't just cars, but also to take advantage of some of those like placemaking ideals and get the community to buy in, really, because Maren, as you said, kind of like the professional side is kind of what you see in traditional street design, but maybe some of the local input can be how we can make some of that our own.
And one of the things I appreciate about community streets is it created a way to do the things that the more classic permitting process would not allow. But those are both ways, and I encourage you, both Victoria and Andrew have insights on doing either of those options or something else if you have an idea in mind and you're not sure how and what way might be the right way forward for yours. So Andrew mentioned that Hope Print and the West Pond Alliance worked on a placemaking project this past summer, and there's a small triangular park that I like to say is imprisoned because it is locked all around the year. And so we unlocked the park and were able to shut down a block, half a block of a city street temporarily throughout the summer and activate it with events for our community kind of taking place around this mural that Andrew mentioned. And Manira was a part of our team in making that possible. And as a nearby Northside resident at the time, bringing your son down there, you talked with a lot of our community, you're a leader in our community. What was the impact of something like that happening in our neighborhood for you and for those who you spoke to?
Thank you, Nicole. Well, as everyone highlighted, truly using the underutilized spaces is a powerful way to bring a positive change and create an impact in the community. And those spaces could become a great hub for economic, social, or spaces for the residents. And the summer program was truly a great experience, a hope for the residents and for people like me who have been not connected and not feeling home, although it's a very diverse community. But if I talk about my own experience, usually because I don't have transportation, so I've been walking around that north side for everything, and I have not been using that space because that has been mostly known for people struggling with addiction, and I have not been feeling safe to walk around that area. But the summer program was a reason for me to come to that area. And not me, but everyone else was, it was a place for them to connect with diverse people from different backgrounds and feeling home and connected. I found new friends. I connected with the people from my community that I did not knew before. I not only me, but my son. It was a full package, I think, because the program was for the kids, for adults, for everyone in the community, from entertainment to fresh vegetables to all the other activities. And seeing that place transforming into a very life and was hopeful to me and others. And in the beginning, we were seeing that the number of visitors or the number of people coming was not as much as we had in the last days, as everyone saw the momentum there. And at the last days, we were being asked that what is next, because people are looking forward for that. And the good thing was that it was not one day, but for weeks, and that we are now connected, and we could have many of those people, especially women, connected into other programs, for example, Her Village, and that there will be more programs, for example, for the winter and for the next season. And even now that we are walking or driving by that area, like my son is asking for that park, for the foam party, for the magic show, and the same, the neighborhood. They are looking forward for such a live event again.
And I think that Manira touched on a few important things as you are scratching down on your own paper and your phone. What does this look like for me? I think it's very important for our placemaking efforts to be anchored in long-term sustainable presence. If you didn't take anything else away, please take that into your soul. I've been driving by the Lodi Triangle the last couple weeks, and it's cold, so it's kind of hard to be outside. But I'm like, we got to get back there because right now it's just sitting there. And I saw the drug deal going down where it was going down before we started things, right? And so we have to continue to be present in these spaces over and over and over again to reclaim them. And that's not only important because we want sustainability, but the impact on our communities is really profound when we just have flashes and then we walk away. And so as you do this, have the long term in mind. It doesn't have to be huge, but just think what I'm doing needs to be seen as the beginning, not as a one-time thing. So whatever that dream is, let's anchor it into a long-term vision. And speaking of vision, as we look at Syracuse, and you all have those dreams, feel free to hop in however you want to in whatever order here to this question, but how would you imagine that Syracuse looks in 20 years from now? What does it look like? How did we get there? What collaborations and things need to be done? As Baxter mentioned at the very beginning, the foundation has to be laid now for what will happen in 20 years, because in 20 years it'll be too late, right? So what needs to happen now to get to that vision? So who would like to hop in first? Victoria, your mic's off.
I think 20 years from now, even 10 years from now, it's going to be extremely important for neighborhoods to have their own identity. And not only just their own identity, but for it to be woven into each other neighborhood, right? So not necessarily a duplication, but a blueprint of what's in these neighborhoods that it gives some type of equality, right? So for example, there's a big splash pad in Camillus, a simple thing, right? But that's something that is a draw for folks. They bring their kids out. A lot of people come from Syracuse to go to that splash pad. There's just things that are, I don't know if it's free, because I haven't paid to go, but things that are accessible to people, things that bring them together, and also an opportunity for folks to sort of be communal. And I think that it's a shame that we only have sort of like a West Scott on the east side, right? There should be a similar neighborhood or blueprint on the south side, the north side, all around. You know, there's opportunity everywhere.
So that was a great point. And identity is something that I think is super important for our neighborhoods and our physical spaces, especially our public spaces. And just from the parks end, one of the things that we're seeing that are coming through for questions more often are like flags. Why can't a neighborhood have its own flag? Why can't a neighborhood have its own identity that's recognized in either a right-of-way or right at the gateway to the neighborhood in a public space? And, you know, these are what I consider lowest hanging fruit that we could accomplish almost tomorrow. With that said, it's an opportunity across the city to create an identity for each of the neighborhood. Each of the neighborhood has park associations. They all have TNTs. They all have mechanisms, but without the proper outreach coming from those smaller niche groups, nobody here is going to know about them. As a city department, we go to where the community wants us to be. So you tell us what meetings you want the Parks Department at so you can express these type of ideas, so you can tell us what identity you want to create in the neighborhood as a group. We will meet you there. And the important part about it is that everybody can be different. There doesn't have to be a singular standard across every of the neighborhoods. Yes, we might prefer a simple bench to be the bench that we use across the city, but that doesn't mean that we can't really design the texture and the feel to really, you know, get to what the community wants it to be. It's a professor that I had a long time ago that always would describe a neighborhood through the texture. And that's not what you feel underneath your feet, but it's what you see. And if a neighborhood has a cohesive feeling and it has boundaries which can be identified, people will just feel more at home, more a part of that community. And I think that's the duty of the city and of the Parks Department, knowing that every single one of the neighborhoods has spaces that can be activated like that.
I would like to extend what Victoria has said. I've been working on a project, a participatory research process over the last 2 years. It's heading into its 3rd year. It's funded by AmeriCorps, the Office of Research and Evaluation, and it's about neighborhoods and health and how the conditions of the neighborhoods impact people's health. And one of the major findings that is coming out of that, and then we're starting to write about, is equity. And we started this process understanding that there is tremendous disparity and inequity in our neighborhoods. You can see it, it's in the health outcomes, and it's in the conditions of the neighborhood. And we've worked with community members over the last couple of years to understand how they perceive health and well-being and how the conditions of the neighborhood affects their health. And we're coming out of this now with a series of action projects. But the idea of how do we in 20 years or over the next 10, 15 years or sooner, promote and support equity in the conditions of our neighborhoods. And green space, open space, places to gather are what community members were asking for. But we also had some community members saying, well, why are you talking about trees? Why are they important? I don't understand that, because that's not part of the things that have been talked about in the places where they are. And so that idea of education, learning about the environment and how our environment impacts our health is important. And I would see that as a stepping stone. And whether it's something that can be done through the city or through ESF or organizations, that we can have education that then helps promote people's understanding of how their neighborhoods impact their lives, and then they can really work more effectively with the Parks Department and other agencies and organizations to make those changes happen.
Well, in 20 years, I would envision that like people will not move from Syracuse for their kids. Like they would like to stay here for the better future of their kids, for having good schools here, good education, good houses, safety, and being comfortable. And I think that will be achieved by continuing these initiatives and these collaborations. Thank you.
Yeah, that's great. I just want to build off that a little bit, kind of what everybody has said, is that perhaps the most important part is actually what everybody is doing here right now, which is like showing up and being champions for what you want to see. Baxter's point in the beginning of like this, you have to be making the changes and speaking about it now, or else you're not going to see what you want in 20 years. And I think it's important to realize that, you know, every little step, when you look back in 20 years, you'll realize like you're at the top of the staircase, and it might not seem like a lot now, but you know, slowly, piece by piece. So something like community streets, not to, you know, plug the own program, but maybe it's just one intersection, and it's something that you know, and it's something you want to see change. You know, maybe you'd love to change the whole neighborhood, and that would be great, but you do it once and it works, and people remember. And maybe you've partnered with the city, and the city says, oh, okay, this actually does work out. There aren't as many barriers to doing something different that we might have thought in the past. Maybe we can make something like this permanent. Who knows? So it's those sort of little steps along the way across a larger 20-year horizon. And I think this is just also a really powerful time. There's a lot of people that are talking about this stuff that has not been talked about as much traditionally. I think we all have an opportunity to really build the place we want to be in 20 years. So, you know, myself, I'm very excited. I'm sure everybody else up here as well. But, you know, you guys have all taken the first step, right? You know, be a champion.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It takes all of us. So we've got some questions, actually a lot of questions. Thank you, Gal, for throwing these out. So we'll have just one or two of us answer each one of these, whoever feels they are the most appropriate. One is, what's the best example of placemaking you've experienced, either locally or anywhere else in the world?
Just about every day I get to hear from constituents, and I get to hear different opportunities, different things that we can improve on. And like I keep saying, it's the experience as a placemaking to me is what I get to do every day. Nothing's done in a vacuum or in a silo. The improvements that you're seeing across the city and the Parks Department are reflective on 20 years worth of planning and 17 years of not having an adequate amount of funds to actually get those projects complete. So again, for me, every day is my experience.
I think a really good example of placemaking occurred at the Lodi Triangle, and the fact that it had an impact on that community. It took a lot of work, right, and a lot of organization, but it was also there for a period of 8 weeks, and it engaged a lot of people in that organization and the action involved in it. From a professional placemaking perspective, I would say I don't even know the name of the space, but if you've ever been to Philadelphia, and right outside of City Hall is a new plaza. It's been there maybe 4 or 5 years. And it is a place that people now gather at all times of the year, all seasons, and it was designed very specifically with the idea that people could come to this space, which used to be kind of underground, I think, it used to be below grade, and it's a very successful space, designed again by professionals, but with guidance from community members and agencies in the city.
Another question here is placemaking requires engaged people. And Victoria, I've witnessed you be one of the masters of getting people here. It says, what are ways you've used to activate a community around placemaking? Can you speak to somehow you done that, and others can weigh in as well?
Can you repeat the last part? You said, what are some ways?
What are ways you've used to activate a community around placemaking?
I would say what I was saying in my opening, that taking people to places where they don't normally see themselves, right? Especially in a segregated community. That's one. The other is working with developers to turn places that are non-traditional into a different type of space, right? So whether it's a loft and you're trying to show them downtown, but you have an event there, or a new restaurant, or things like that, taking people on a tour of Syracuse, I think that gives some success as well, because people are intrigued to see what things have turned into or what they are. And that's one of the ways. But then also having a very diverse crowd, and I mean throughout socioeconomic levels, in the same space. That draws more people too. When I first started out, I was in the niche from a marketing standpoint of minority millennials, bringing them together, telling their stories. As it grew, I saw that the secret sauce or the sweet spot was individuals that may be CEOs or students across the gamut, that we don't always see each other as being accessible. So being in the same room in a more laid back space, like that's where the magic happens. That's where initiatives got started, where people exchanged ideas and started businesses and did all these different things just because they were able to have contact. So it's proximity a lot of the times, putting people in proximity with others. And then also, as an organizer of that, just having 10 to 15 one-on-ones a week, meeting new people, asking them hard questions. What's their passion? Why do they do what they do? And then what's going off in my brain is, you need to meet X, Y, Z. I never tell all these people they need to meet each other, right? I just put them in the same room.
Just to add to that, I totally agree, but I think an important thing is seeing the space and being in proximity on foot or by bike. I think so many times the people who might be detractors of certain placemaking projects are just flying through in their car, and you're kind of in this little walled off, you're not really experiencing a place. So if you can just even be standing in somewhere, that I think really kind of helps you build placemaking in a different way. Seeing an environment, a neighborhood, by foot or by bike, or just kind of, at the pedestrian scale, can really help doing that sort of placemaking.
Absolutely. We've got a lot of questions in here that are very practical in terms of, okay, I want to do something. What do I need to do it? So one question in here is referring to like the type of spaces that we can use. So I want to just categorize and then have different folks respond here. So there's private unused space, such as vacant lots. A lot of them are owned by the land bank, but some are just owned by private owners. whenever it's private, it's up to the owner regarding what you can do, and zoning, of course. But those are privately owned and therefore managed by the private owner. So that's who you would talk to. However, whenever land is public, it is, if you're in the city of Syracuse, it's the city of Syracuse's purview. And if it's a public park, that's who manages it, then it's going to be public parks. And so I'll have you, Josh, speak to what that looks like. And if it is streets and sidewalks, it's predominantly DPW and that process, which Andrew is more familiar with the community streets side of things. So in super fast bullet point form, can you tell folks, if I want to have an event at the park, what do I need to do?
Invite the fire department. That's always number one. Health and safety is the number one priority for emergency services. So if you're planning to activate a space and you're trying to do it either permitted or unpermitted, or you think that the worst case scenario is actually on your mind, get ahead of it and invite the right people so you can explain to them and get them on the ground. And number two, real quickly, is that vacant lots. The city of Syracuse physically owns 111 vacant lots that are managed, maintained, and controlled by the Parks Department. That's through mowing contracts and just picking up the space. Those are opportunities that you don't realize that they're almost a public park, but a vacant lot owned by the city, essentially functions as a public park right in the middle of a neighborhood. So they're always an opportunity that you could bring to the parks.
Yeah, thanks. And to keep everything super fast, I will also once again plug, we can pass out some of these later. By scanning this QR code and going to the Community Streets website, that's smtcmpo.org/community streets. You'll find basically a step-by-step guide about all of the things that you need to do to both come up with a plan, to apply, to be part of the program, and exactly which sort of people you'll need to talk to. So that, to keep things short on time, I'll say go there to answer the question.
Excellent. And community streets is not the only way to shut down a street. 2 microphones at a time. They just love each other. So the only way, there's not the only way to shut down a street. There's also the block party permit, which is processed through the permit department, like where you go to get a building permit, same office. And so there are a number of different ways, but in my experience, if you can have the fortune of working with community streets, then you've got a bunch of cheerleaders in your corner, so it's a great program. Live question.
A quick follow-up on the permitted versus unpermitted. What is the difference, and what does it get you?
Permitted versus unpermitted. If you're just a group of people that likes to meet up at a certain time on a certain date, have at it. I'm not speaking for what the requirements are, but I know from the Parks Department standpoint, if you want to have a recognized event that might have a fiscal sponsor or could be through a not-for-profit, it's best to reach out as early as you can just to make sure that insurances and liabilities and all the things that could come with that are dotted and crossed. So.
Manira is back, so we have a Manira question here. How can we encourage more placemaking in our communities?
Well, I think it's more by involving the community, and I experienced that in Lodi Triangle, since it involved a large number of community members, not only by inviting them to be part of it, but to take part into all those activities, and first from consultation to planning and to delivering those services into that triangle. So I think more by engaging them and having the community involved, yeah.
Anyone else want to weigh in on that question?
I would say also it starts with an idea. And it starts with a couple of people who are willing to, like you were saying, engage other people and to provide that leadership and continuity in a process. And it's been mentioned, Nicole, that you have to think about sustainability. And I've worked on a few different projects where we had something that was put in place, implemented, and then the long-term maintenance was not kept up. And so that really needs to be considered, even in temporary situations where it might be up just for a few weeks. You have to take care of it and then think about it as in the future as more permanent.
In our last few minutes here, we're going to try to do one more question, but one of the questions here is how you know who owns land. And I think we have our city planners all here, or most of them here. Could you stand up if you are a City of Syracuse planner? I saw you guys walk in. All right, we got 1, 2, there's a few more in here. I would strongly encourage you to talk to your NBD rep, which are your planners, most specifically your quadrant planner, because they're really good at investigatory work and have access to all the city's records. So if you're within the city of Syracuse, unless it's obviously a public park, and that would be the second answer.
And a quick shout out to our API team over at the city. We have an amazing data team that has done great work, and the city of Syracuse has an open data portal. In that open data portal is every quarter the parcel list of every parcel in the city gets uploaded to that portal. Anyone in this room can go and extract those Excel files and look at owners and various parts of information, and then of course go through the county tax websites to really get the history of that site. But through the open data portal, you can find anything from the spaces and the equipment that the Parks Department owns and has and where that's at, to the properties, to public art, you name it, it's probably there right now.
Beautiful. We've got a few more minutes left, and so we've got one more live question here that we will cover.
Okay, so I wanted to go back real quick to Victoria's ideas of neighborhood identities and things like that. We kind of often, I think, experience some problems where it can feel like neighborhoods aren't in control of like their ability to make their own identity. What? Oh, it can feel like neighborhoods aren't in control of their ability to form their own identities through parks, through spaces, or through own programming, or just in general, whether that's because of, you know, out of city property owners or due to zoning regulations or massive highways. My question to the panel is, what is, like, if you could pick one or two things that need to change to make it so that neighborhoods can, you know, form these identities, what are those things? We've touched on, I think, two main ones being cars or, yeah, thanks. Being cars and being kind of segregation, I think, being the two discussed so far. Thanks.
I'm a big proponent on education, right? About 20 years ago, I became a community organizer, and I just became fascinated with the fact that, oh, communities don't just happen. You know, they're organized, they're systematic. This is here, there's zoning, there's all these things. A lot of people don't know that, right? And so I think it would start with, if you have a group already that is interested in this type of thing, to just get even more organized and start to bullet point what you're trying to do in your neighborhood and bring other people on and educate them on how this process works. If there's roadblocks, I heard you mention out-of-town realtors, things of that nature, I think you just need to do some power mapping around who is involved with this issue and who do you need to get in contact with or touch base with to, you know, sort of make a well-informed action plan.
I think it could also be helped within the city agencies to understand how they collaborate or cooperate with each other in making decisions to support neighborhood organizations and groups in making the types of changes that they would like to see.
Sounds like a great opportunity to host a 101 with some folks who've done it before, for those of you who might be interested. So we'll try and pull something like that together. And if you are interested in doing that, to kind of get a download on how the systems work, what power mapping means, if that's not something you already know, important skill to have. So you looked like you wanted to say something in follow-up.
This is just a point of clarification for Marin. You mentioned changes. The question was, what were those changes that need to be made to enable that to happen?
You know what? I'm going to have Marin answer that question to you specifically, because I'm getting the "we're out of time, Nicole" looks from Baxter over there. So Marin, if you can make sure to follow up. And we've got a 15-minute break, so any of the rest of you that had questions, please come grab these guys and feel free to ask them. Panelists, thank you. These mugs are gifts from the team for you to take home. We're so grateful for you being here with us today.